Rich lady splashes mud on a poor lady. Then the unimaginable happens. The rain had just stopped falling on the cobblestone streets of Luxembourg's wealthy upper quarter. The city shimmered under the golden hue of the early evening light, the old European buildings proudly displaying their Gothic charm. Sleek black cars roared past, drivers impatient to get home. Puddles dotted the roadside like forgotten coins, reflecting distorted images of the opulent world above them. Among the hurrying feet and honking horns stood Elise Moreau, a woman so wealthy her name opened doors in high society like a royal seal. Her family owned hotels across Europe, vineyards in Bordeaux, and oil in the Middle East. She was the epitome of polished wealth, blonde hair in a tight chignon, pearl earrings, and a couture trench coat that cost more than the average person's annual income. Her luxury Rolls-Royce had just been serviced and polished to perfection. She was on her way to a charity gala, not out of compassion, but because her presence raised the event's prestige. As the car rounded the corner near the Avenue de la Liberté, Elise's driver swerved to avoid a cyclist, speeding directly through a muddy puddle. The splash hit a pedestrian on the narrow sidewalk, a woman who had been quietly walking with a canvas tote bag full of groceries. The mud hit her squarely in the chest, soaking her simple beige dress and staining her face. She staggered, trying to shield herself, but it was too late. The woman gasped. The air around her seemed to freeze. Elise rolled down her window and leaned out, sneering, "Maybe try walking somewhere else next time, darling." Then the car drove away. That woman, now drenched and trembling, was Camille Duret. She was poor, at least that's what the world saw. She lived in a crumbling two-room flat above a bakery in the city's old quarter. Her mother had passed away the previous year, and Camille worked two jobs, one as a cleaner in a museum and another in a retirement home. Every euro mattered. Every meal was counted. Every gesture of cruelty from the rich was noted in silence. But what Elise didn't know, what no one knew, was that Camille wasn't just a poor cleaner. She was the daughter of a French industrialist who had vanished 15 years ago under scandalous circumstances. When her father disappeared, Camille and her mother were stripped of all rights to the family estate. It was a betrayal orchestrated by distant relatives who had forged documents, declared Camille's father dead, and hidden the fortune in offshore accounts. Camille had chosen to live in obscurity, determined to rebuild her life and eventually expose the truth. Until now, she had remained silent. But that splash, Elise's cruelty, her arrogance, unleashed something inside Camille. The next day, Camille went to work as usual, pretending nothing had changed. But that night, she retrieved a locked box from under her bed. Inside were handwritten letters, a legal deed, and a worn photograph of her and her father in front of the Duret estate in Bordeaux. She took a deep breath. It was time to reclaim everything. Meanwhile, Elise's life was spiraling in ways she hadn't expected. Her family business was being investigated for tax evasion. Her younger brother had gambled away millions. And worst of all, a scandal was brewing involving a forged land deal in the south of France. 1 week after the mud incident, Elise was seated in the champagne room of Hotel St. Clair, trying to convince an investor that her family's brand was still trustworthy. Just as she was lifting her flute of rose, the doors burst open. A woman entered the room. It was Camille. But this time, she wasn't wearing the beige dress. She wore a tailored navy blue suit, her hair pulled back neatly. She looked polished, professional, powerful. In her hands were documents that would unravel Elise's world. "I believe you know who I am," Camille said coolly. "Or perhaps you don't. That makes what comes next even better." Elise froze. "What is this?" "Security." But no one moved. The investor recognized Camille instantly. She had just acquired 40% of his company's shares. She was no longer poor Camille from the bakery. She was Camille Durrett, rightful heir to the Durrett fortune, a quiet investor who had spent years strategically buying back her inheritance under different names. Elise stood up, face pale. "You're lying. This is a joke." Camille smiled faintly. The joke was splashing mud on someone whose family used to own half of Bordeaux. With a click, Camille opened her portfolio and placed documents on the table: signed court rulings, DNA proof of lineage, and offshore bank ledgers. The investor picked them up, scanning rapidly. His jaw tightened. "You," he said, turning to Elise, "are finished." The next days were a media storm. Heiress returns to reclaim billion-euro fortune read the headlines. Elise's family reputation was shredded. Shareholders pulled out. Hotels closed. Investigations were reopened. Elise tried to save herself with apologies, but it was too late. Camille, however, was graceful. She didn't seek revenge, only justice. She didn't sue Elise. She didn't humiliate her in public interviews. Instead, she bought out Elise's favorite fashion label and turned it into a nonprofit supporting disadvantaged young women. Months later, Camille was standing on the same street where it all began. A soft drizzle fell. She carried no umbrella. A Rolls-Royce passed slowly, and she stepped aside in time, not out of fear, but instinct. Inside that car, Elise sat quietly, no longer wearing pearls, no longer admired. Her wealth was gone. Her pride shattered. Camille didn't look back. Because the unimaginable had already happened. The poor woman in the mud had risen, and the rich woman had fallen into it. And fate, with its own sense of poetry, had splashed the world clean again.